Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, the springing tiger of Indian nationalism. Give me blood and I will give you freedom. This slogan is probably unknown to no one who has had the great fortune of being born as the child of Mother India. The man behind the slogan, as most of us already know, is none other than Subhash Chandra Bose, fondly remembered as Netaji by all of us today. The slogan, enough to raise goosebumps, was indicative of not only the charisma of this great man, but also his ideological divergence from the mainstream trend of the Indian national movement led by Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. Going against the Gandhian normative ideal of his time, Netaji advocated the use of more aggressive and even violent means to achieve the end goal of Indian independence. Such a desire and conviction found expression through the creation of an army, which he spearheaded during World War II, comprising of the Indian prisoners in the camps of the Axis powers. While his goal of liberating India with the help of a full-fledged army didn't succeed, his actions had wider ramifications that led to a series of events, ultimately forcing the British to leave India by 1947. This is the story of that man, a man who was reckless in his service, unceasing in his activity, boundless in his love, profound and versatile in his wisdom, exuberant in his emotions, merciless in his attacks, and yet simple as a child. These words, expressed by Netaji as a token of respect for his ideological guru, Swami Vivekananda, could very well have been applied to him. Early life. Subhash Chandra Bose was born in a Bengali family at Cuttack in Odisha on 23rd January 1897. His father, Janaki Nath Bose, was a successful barrister who had a flourishing legal practice at Cuttack. His mother, Prabhavati Devi, was a woman of strong personality and religious conviction. Though they lived in Cuttack, the original ancestral home of Subhash was in the Kodalia village of present-day North 24 Parganas district of West Bengal, now rechristened as Subhash Gram. Formative years. Subhash was enrolled at the Protestant European School in Cuttack, where he very quickly proved himself to be a meritorious student. Unfortunately, given the westernized nature of the school, Subhash wasn't exposed to Indian literature or philosophy till then. He only learned British history, Western philosophy, and Latin in such a school. It was when Subhash enrolled at the Ravenshaw Collegiate School at Cuttack in high school grade that he came face to face with the India that he never got to saw till then. He was the only student to come in trousers and shirt in a class full of boys wearing dhoti. He couldn't understand a word of Sanskrit, and even though he knew Bengali, he couldn't read or write it. At first, he faced great difficulty and was mocked by his classmates and teachers for being too westernized. But the principal, Beni Madhav Das, understood his potential and decided to help him. It was under his guidance that Subhash ultimately overcame his academic difficulties and stood second in the entire Bengal presidency in matriculation examination. It was an early proof of the determination of the young Subhash to succeed at any initiative. It was during his Ravenshaw years that Subhash became socially and politically conscious as well. His principal, Beni Madhav Das, introduced him to the works of Swami Vivekananda and Rabindranath Tagore, two stalwarts who left a deep imprint on the philosophy of Subhash for the rest of his life. He was greatly inspired by Swami Vivekananda's re-articulation of the ancient wisdom of Vedanta and even started spiritual experiments on his own. He was attracted to the life of an ascetic and left home in 1913 at the age of 16 For nearly a year, roaming about in the rest of India in search for answers to his spiritual quest. He ultimately returned home when he realized that spiritual salvation could be realized only through political freedom. Those who were politically enslaved could never gain moksha. His countrywide travels had exposed him to the brutal conditions of colonial India and had inspired in him this resolve. Nevertheless, Swamiji's message continued to be an everlasting source of inspiration for him. Progressive Years, 1914 to 1921. In 1914, he got admitted to Presidency College under Calcutta University for pursuing BA Honours in Philosophy. He, however, ended up being expelled after 1 year in college as a result of his suspected involvement in the manhandling of Professor Otten for racist remarks he made against Indians and also for beating up an Indian student. While his involvement in the incident was not beyond doubt, his active role in the student community and vocal remarks against the college administration had already made him a target for the authorities. His initiative in organizing a students' strike in order to force the professor to apologize had sealed his fate. At this point, the Vice-Chancellor of the Calcutta University, Dr. Ashutosh Mukherjee, came to his rescue. He ensured that Subhash got enrolled at Scottish Church College and ultimately Subhash could succeed in the university examinations by attaining high rank. Subhash also got attracted to military training during his college years. He joined the University Cadet Corps and got the first taste of martial spirit. This was to be an enduring influence in his life, apart from his already discussed fascination with spiritualism. Apart from this, he was also involved in a cholera relief mission in Odisha during this time as well, getting to know his country and work for it in an even better manner. In 1919, he was asked by his father to go to England and sit for the civil service examinations. He got enrolled at Fitzwilliam Hall of Cambridge University in the same year. He got enrolled at Fitzwilliam Hall of Cambridge University in the same year and sat for the exams in 1920. He came out with flying colors, securing 4th rank in the examination and a master's in mental and moral sciences. But this was a moment of reckoning for Subhash. Till then, he had obediently followed his father's orders, but now he felt in a moment of epiphany that this was not a life he wanted. He got to know about the horrible atrocities that were perpetrated by the British in Punjab, and he was convinced that he could never serve the colonial state which was ravaging his countrymen every day. He was in a dilemma, but then in early 1921 he took a final call and resigned from the service by addressing a letter to the Secretary of State. A new chapter in Subhash's life was about to begin. Political career 1921 to 33. After returning to India by ship, the first thing Subhash did was to meet Gandhiji in Bombay. He was interested in joining the national movement and thus was eager to have this meeting. However, the first meeting revealed the gulf between the two strong personalities that was to characterize their relationship for the next 2 decades. Seeing that it was difficult to reconcile with Subhash, Gandhiji suggested him to contact Chittaranjan Das, the stalwart Congress leader of Bengal. This was to have a momentous impact on the life of Subhash. Subhash, after coming to Calcutta, got attracted by the personality and work of C.R. Das and became his political disciple. C.R. Das understood the potential of the young Subhash and gave him several responsibilities like editing 2 newspapers, Swaraj and Forward. He helped organize a protest demonstration in Calcutta to boycott the visit of the Prince of Wales to India as part of the broader non-cooperation movement that was taking place in 1920 to 1921. For this, he was arrested for the first time in his life. December 1921 marked the beginning of a jail journey that was to repeat itself over the next 2 decades. After serving 3 months in jail, Subhash didn't stop, but became even more active. His stellar work in the relief effort during the North Bengal floods of 1922 and other organizational work was recognized when he was made the President of All India Youth Congress and Secretary of Bengal State Congress in 1923. In 1924, he became the Chief Executive Officer of the Calcutta Corporation under C.R. Das when Das was elected as Mayor of Calcutta. In this capacity, Bose pioneered major reform efforts such as opening primary schools and primary health centers in each ward and making the municipal body more democratic and transparent in nature. This was the time when the revolutionary movement in Bengal again showed signs of revival. Gopinath Saha, a young revolutionary, tried to assassinate the police commissioner of Calcutta, Charles Tegart, but failed. He was hanged. When Bose launched a protest demonstration in memory of Saha in Calcutta, he was rounded up along with other leaders by the police and sent to the notorious prison in Mandalay in Burma. He was imprisoned there for 2 years, 1925 to 1927, and contracted tuberculosis because of his jail experience. It was during his stay in jail that Subhash started studying communist and fascist literature, which went on to influence his ideology later. Meanwhile, his guru C.R. Das had passed away in 1925. The Bengal Congress was in complete disarray in the absence of these 2 men. Fortunately, by 1927, Subhash was released. In that same year, Subhash was elected as General Secretary of Indian National Congress and was also made part of the Congress Working Committee, its central decision-making body. In 1928, during the Calcutta session of the Congress, Subhash organized the Congress Volunteers Corps, which was imparted with military training and was meant to perform the role of a semi-militia body. He himself was their GOC, that is, General Officer Commanding. This was a reflection of his enthusiasm with militarism, something that always made Gandhi uncomfortable. Despite Gandhiji's disapproval of this as a circus, Bose earned immense popularity for this initiative. Subsequently, Subhash continued with his involvement in the Gandhian civil disobedience movement as well. In 1930, he was elected the mayor of Calcutta and earned immense accolades for his work. However, he was again arrested for his involvement in the second phase of the civil disobedience movement in 1932. And due to his growing complications due to tuberculosis in jail, the British government decided to send him to Europe for treatment, which was a subterfuge for sending him virtually to exile. European Sojourn 1933 to 1938. Subhash spent nearly 5 years in Europe. These 5 years gave Subhash the international experience and contact with various people that he was to subsequently use during the Second World War. He mostly spent time in countries like Austria and Germany and gradually recovered from tuberculosis. He also met leaders like Benito Mussolini and Goering. Though he denounced the racist policies of Nazi Germany, he admired the authoritarian state structure and militarism of both Italy and Germany. Seeing the conditions in Europe, he correctly predicted the outbreak of a Second World War. He also got involved in a relationship with Emilia Schenkel, who he was to marry during his second visit to Europe in the 1940s. He managed to visit London in 1937, but could meet only leaders of the Labour Party, in the hope of convincing British public and leadership about the futility of holding on to India. Political career 1938 to 41. Subhash returned to India in 1938, and soon after, he was elected the president of the Indian National Congress for its annual session at Haripura. In this session, Subhash came out with the concept of a National Planning Committee, which was to formulate schemes for Indian development similar to the 5-year plans of USSR. Nehru was made the head of the committee, and it comprised of distinguished members like Meghnad Saha and Rabindranath Tagore. It formed a blueprint for the Post-Independence Planning Commission in India. During his stint as president, his advocacy of immediate withdrawal of British rule from India and use of violent means concerned the moderates within the Congress. Most of all, Gandhi. They were adamant at preventing Bose's re-election, but failed. As in 1939, Bose was again elected president of the Congress, this time for the session at Tripuri. Gandhi, however, was not a person to accept such an outcome. He called Bose's victory his defeat, and this served as a cue for the mass resignations of others from the Congress Working Committee, leaving Bose with a defunct organization. Even Nehru now opposed him. Seeing no other option, Bose was forced to resign from his post so that Congress could be saved. It was a humiliating chapter in the history of the Indian freedom movement. Subhash, however, still remained within the Congress. He was convinced of his approach and formed the Forward Bloc in May 1939 as a party within the Congress to advocate an alternative approach to the freedom struggle. His growing popularity amongst people and defiance of the central leadership once again made him a target of attack, when in August 1939 he was expelled from the Congress for 3 years. The Bengal Congress itself was reorganized to curtail Bose's influence and bring it more strongly under high command. This may have eventually given Bose the breather that he needed. He devoted himself to the full-scale organization of the All India Forward Bloc in different parts of India. He was even elected to the Central Legislative Assembly in 1940. By this time, the Second World War had finally broken out. Lord Linlithgow, the Viceroy, took India to war without consulting the Indian people. Bose advocated a hard-line approach in his context. He argued that not only should all political parties refuse to support the government's war effort, but they should immediately launch a civil disobedience movement to take advantage of British weakness and liberate India. Gandhi was unwilling to endorse such an approach and instead called for only individual satyagraha. This made Subhash even more disillusioned regarding the prospects of freedom and made him consider alternative options. In 1940, Subhash also managed to capture the Calcutta Corporation in alliance with the Muslim League and became the corporation's alderman. He now advocated Hindu-Muslim unity on a stronger scale in order to bridge the gulf between the two communities. For this, he chose a very emotive symbol, the Holwell Monument. For him, this monument stood as a symbol of the lie of Black Hole of Calcutta, the perception that Bengal's last Nawab, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, had suffocated to death the Britishers in a dingy prison of Calcutta. He demanded the removal of the monument and launched a satyagraha in July 1940 to achieve this. As a result, he was again imprisoned. Behind the scenes, Subhash had already started making his plans for escaping from India. Through the Japanese embassy, he had already established contact with the Italians and Germans. Through his Forward Bloc network, he also established contacts with communists of Punjab and NWFP, many of whom were Soviet spies. So he went on a hunger strike in order to force the British to release him from prison, in fear of his death. His tactics succeeded as the government now decided to keep him under house arrest. This was the opportunity Subhash was looking for. On 17th January 1941 at midnight, Subhash escaped from his home in Calcutta in his own car with his nephew Cecil in company. The Great Escape had begun. The Great Escape. Subhash made a daring escape from Kolkata and reached by train in the disguise of a Pathan to Peshawar by 23rd January 1941. With the help of Akbar Shah, his colleague in the Forward Bloc, he got in touch with Bhagat Ram Talwar, a Communist Party member who was serving also as a Soviet spy. Before British even noticed his absence on 26 January, Subhash was able to cross the border and enter Afghanistan with Talwar as his guide. In Kabul, he managed to get an Indian diplomatic passport under the name of Senor Orlando, with the help of which he was finally able to travel to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, however, refused to help him. Stalin distrusted him as a British spy. He offered Subhash a plane journey to Germany, which he reluctantly accepted. Subhash reached Berlin by early April in 1941. Engagement with Nazis. Subhash's objective after he reached Berlin was to carve out an Indian army with the help of the Indian prisoners in German camps. These Indian soldiers, numbering around 4,500, had been captured in the North African theatre. His aim was to use this army, along with Axis assistance, to attack India through the northwest and liberate her from the British yoke. On 25th December 1941, Subhash formed the Free India Legion, a precursor to the INA, with the Indian soldiers. On this occasion, the new Indian flag, later the INA flag, was hoisted, and Rabindranath Tagore's Jana Gan Man was adopted as the national anthem. The Azad Hind Radio was also launched, through which he regularly sent messages to the Indian people. Though it was officially banned, many Indian people managed to get hold of the German airwaves and listen to the broadcast. However, his hopes were dashed with Operation Barbarossa. Hitler's attack on the USSR robbed Subhash of a reliable ally, whom he had always respected ideologically. Moreover, the German army was now bogged down in Eastern Europe and couldn't concentrate on West Asia. In a meeting with Hitler on May 1942, Subhash conveyed his angst to the Führer. Hitler suggested Subhash to take the help of the Japanese, who by then were knocking at the gates of India. Subhash agreed with the proposal. On January 1943, Subhash departed from Germany in a U-boat, that is a submarine, headed for Japan. By this time, he had already married Emilie Schenkel and had given birth to a daughter, Anita Pluff. He had to leave them behind for his new journey into the unknown. Japan and INA. After a long journey across the Atlantic and Indian Ocean, Subhash finally reached Singapore on June 1943. By then, the India Independence League under Raj Bihari Bose had already created the Indian National Army out of the Indian soldiers captured by the Japanese. From General Tojo, the Premier of Japan, Subhash got all promise of assistance. On September 1943, Subhash was officially made the Commander-in-Chief of the Indian National Army. He took to work very quickly, and gradually he gathered around him capable men and women like Abid Hassan, A.C. Chatterjee and many others. On October 21, 1943, the Provisional Government of Free India was formed, with Subhash as the President. This provisional government came to possess not only its own army but also its own bank, currency, stamp. In December 1943, the provisional government was also given the control of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands by the Japanese army. Subhash also got to work to make the INA into a full-fledged functional army. Brigades were named after Gandhi, Nehru, Azad. They were to be led by prominent Indian Army officers like Shahnawaz Khan, K.P. Sehgal and G.S. Dhillon. Separate eating arrangements and caste-based regiments were done away with to create a more cohesive and united army. His goal was to unite everyone, transcending the barriers of caste, religion, linguistics, and even gender. A separate women's regiment, Rani Jhansi Regiment, was created to allow women to fight the war as well. And this was placed under the command of Lakshmi Swaminathan, later Lakshmi Sehgal. The Indian diaspora in Southeast Asia came forward freely to contribute in terms of men, material and money for the liberation struggle. Subhash inspired everyone with his call. The road to Delhi is the road to freedom. Chalo Dilli, that is, march to Delhi. Finally, in February 1944, the INA along with the Japanese army launched an offensive against the Allies. After capturing much of Arakan, the INA reached Indian soil by early April. On April 14, 1944, at Moirang in present-day Manipur, the INA flag was first hoisted on Indian soil. Initially, the INA made rapid successes, and by May, fierce battle was raging in Kohima and Imphal. But the onset of the monsoons and the lack of Japanese air power stalled their progress. On the other hand, the Americans brought to the field their enormous air power, and by June, the INA Japanese offensive had been effectively destroyed. The INA had to retreat to Rangoon. This setback had dashed Subhash's hopes, and the news of German reverses in Europe made him understand that the war had been lost. In January 1945, the British launched their offensive against Burma. The INA again had to retreat, and many surrendered. Subhash himself had to retreat to Singapore. The end? The curtain came down on August 15, 1945, when Japan declared that it would surrender to the Allies. Subhash understood that he had to adopt a new strategy. What happened thereafter remains a great mystery. He was last officially seen in Saigon Airport on 17 August 1945. From there, he boarded a plane, his ultimate destination, according to eyewitness accounts, being Tokyo. However, there were credible rumors that he was bound for Soviet-held Manchuria. Eyewitnesses of his last journey testify that the plane carrying Subhash and them crashed at the Taihoku airport of Formosa, today's Taiwan. Subhash suffered extensive burns because of this crash and ultimately succumbed to it in the General Hospital on the evening of 18 August 1945. However, there were contradictions in these testimonies that were given before 3 different commissions, and the Mukherjee Commission, which delivered its report in 2005, refused to accept the plane crash theory. The Government of India, however, rejected the report. Till date, the Government of India's official position is that Subhash Chandra Bose breathed his last in Taihoku on 18 August 1945 due to a plane crash. Aftermath. The end of the Second World War saw the surrender of all the INA soldiers and officers to the Allied powers. 3 officers, Shah Nawaz Khan, G.C. Dhillon and K. Sehgal, were brought to the Red Fort in Delhi for trial on charges of treason and also for court-martial. This ignited public opinion across the country. People came out into the streets and protested against the state for prosecuting INA officers. Even the Congress came out in support of INA. Congress lawyers like Bhulabhai Desai fought in defense of the INA officers in the Red Fort trial. Such was the force of public opinion that while they were convicted, the 3 INA officers were given clemency by the Commander-in-Chief of the British Indian Army. This didn't stop there, however. Soon there was a massive mutiny in the Royal Indian Navy, and also there were sporadic mutinies in some army units. The British now realized that even the army was going out of their control, and without it, they could never control India. Clement Attlee, who was the British PM during the transfer of power to India in 1947, admitted in one of his private conversations that the primary consideration for the British to leave India was Netaji and his INA, which had led to the pro-INA protests and the naval mutiny. It had effectively shaken off the last remaining loyalist bastions of the Raj. Views and ideology. Subhash Chandra Bose believed that the Bhagavad Gita was a great source of inspiration for the struggle against the British. In this, he was greatly inspired by Swami Vivekananda's Vedanta. Inner religious explorations continued to be a part of his life all throughout. Though a proponent of secularism as state policy and a leftist by economic orientation, he always believed in God. He expressed his preference for a synthesis between socialism and fascism in a speech that he delivered at Calcutta in 1930. He called it Samyavad. He felt that communism would fail in India because of its rejection of nation and God. He admired militarism, state control of the economy, and an authoritarian state which he found to be the common ground between fascism and socialism. He was greatly impressed by Kemal Atatürk's experiment in Turkey, and many experts surmise that the Turkey model would have inspired him the most regarding post-independence model for India. Subhash was also a fervent believer in the necessity for fast and state-led heavy industrialization. In this, he was inspired by the 5-year plans of USSR. He was a fierce critic of the Gandhian model of village-based self-sufficient economy. Subhash Chandra Bose did not write widely. However, he wrote very well. Two of his most famous works are The Indian Struggle, which was a history of the Indian freedom movement from 1919 to 1934, and an autobiography, The Indian Pilgrim, which covered his life from 1897 to 1919. Besides this, a collection of his essays and letters written in Bengali was published as the book Toruner Shopno, The Dream of a Young Man. Legacy. Subhash Chandra Bose is fondly remembered as Netaji today. A number of public roads, parks and facilities are named after him. His birth anniversary, 23rd January, is now celebrated as Parakram Divas by the Government of India. On the occasion of his 125th birth anniversary, which is still ongoing, a permanent granite statue of him is being installed at the India Gate. The Netaji Research Bureau in Kolkata continues the task of preserving his memory through conservation of his writings, artifacts, and even his house. Conclusion. Subhash Chandra Bose, or Netaji, continues to inspire millions of his countrymen even till today. The saga of his sacrifice for the nation is bound to both inspire and bring tears to the eyes of all Indians. His clarion call, "Freedom is not given, it is taken," reminds us that achieving independence is never easy. As he himself said, one individual may die for an idea, but that idea will, after his death, incarnate itself in 1,000 lives. Netaji, the idea, remains immortal through his incarnations.